Are you dreaming of visiting Switzerland? Planning a trip to Switzerland is very exciting, but it can also be overwhelming. How do you choose which of the many scenic cities, towns, and villages to visit? Which mountaintop excursions should you take? And what's the best way to get around Switzerland? And of course, how much of the country can you realistically see within your time frame? If you've asked yourself any of these questions, this is the podcast for you. This is the Holidays to Switzerland travel podcast, and in each episode, your host Carolyn Schonnefinger chats with Swiss travel experts to answer your most commonly asked questions, provide practical tips, and take you on a virtual visit to the most popular destinations, and of course some hidden gems to help you plan your dream trip to Switzerland. And you'll hear plenty of conversations about Swiss cheese and chocolate too. Are you ready to plan your trip to Switzerland? Well, let's get started.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the podcast. I've just spent 5 fabulous weeks exploring Switzerland, from east to west and south to north. And what a fantastic trip it was. My husband and I had a great trip, but it wasn't only a holiday. There was plenty of research and trying out new experiences so that I can share them with you too. See what I put myself through on your behalf? But seriously, it was a great trip and I discovered so many more places in Switzerland that I've fallen in love with. And I can't wait to tell you all about them. I also had the opportunity to meet some of the lovely guests who have been on the podcast and to try out their products and services myself. It was wonderful to get to know these ambassadors for Switzerland and to get a first-hand appreciation of their hotels, tours, rail passes, and more. In this episode, rather than having a special guest on, I thought I'd share with you an overview of my itinerary and some of the many new things I learned along the way. Hopefully, this will help you to plan your own dream trip to Switzerland. Before we get started, I'd like to say a huge thank you to Switzerland Tourism, sponsors of the podcast. Take a look at their website, myswitzerland.com, for loads of info and inspiration for planning your Swiss vacation. There are an endless number of scenic places that will capture your heart in this beautiful country. So, if you need the perfect shot, you need Switzerland. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about my trip. You may not be able to spend 5 weeks in Switzerland, but perhaps you can take the bits that appeal to you from my itinerary and include them in your own. We started our visit to Switzerland in Appenzell, which is in the east of the country. It's a really rural area with beautiful rolling green hills, lots of cows, plenty of cowbells, and it's very traditional. We stayed here for 6 nights, and it was a great base for exploring other parts of eastern Switzerland, such as St. Gallen, Schaffhausen, the Rhine Falls. Now, we had a car while we were here, and you might ask why, because I am a big advocate for the Swiss Travel Pass, which we did use later on in the trip. But we had a car in this part of Switzerland because our trip actually started with a week in northern Italy where we stayed with family of my husband. So we'd flown into Milan, we picked up a rental car and we drove up to northern Italy near the Dolomites where we stayed for a week. And then we continued our trip on into Appenzeller land. We actually did stay quite rurally here. We didn't stay in one of the towns. We stayed in a little cottage on a farm. So it was very rural. And whilst there is good public transport in Appenzeller land, it was even a bit too rural where we stayed to make use of that. The nearest bus was about 1.5 kilometres away. So it was great to have a car here. And as I said, we used this part of the country, this part of the trip for exploring lots of other places around eastern Switzerland. From here, we drove to Fitznau and left our car in a garage overnight while we took the cogwheel train up to Mount Rigi. And this was, a fantastic experience. I've wanted to go to Mount Rigi for a very long time. And so it was great to finally get there. And rather than just do a day excursion, we decided to stay the night and just really enjoy and appreciate the surroundings. The views are just incredible. You can see so many lakes, so many mountains. It was a fantastic excursion. And there's a thermal spa at Rigi Kaltbad, which is not actually at the summit. It's one of the intermediate stations. There's actually a little village there. And the thermal spa was wonderful. From Mount Rigi, after our night there, we drove south to Lugano in the Italian-speaking canton of Ticino. We arrived in the afternoon and had a bit of a look around. The next day, then, we returned our hire car to Como in Italy, and then took the train back to Lugano, which was only about 45 minutes. So from here on in, we were totally reliant on public transport. Some of the great things that we did in Lugano included visiting the old town, which is just beautiful. We did a lake cruise and had a dinner at a traditional Ticinese grotti, which was fantastic, and the sunset views over the lake were amazing. We took the funicular to Montebre. Again, incredible views from the mountain, and quite different to Mount Rigi. It's, I guess you could say it's a bit more fjord-like, Lake Lugano. The mountains are very close to the lake, and the views, amazing. We also did a cruise to Morcote, which in 2016 won the title of the most beautiful village in Switzerland, and it really is well worth a visit. From Lugano, we were heading towards Zermatt, or to Zermatt actually. So we hopped on board the train. We went to Andermatt, and then we changed there to the Glacier Express from Andermatt to Zermatt. So that was a wonderful experience to have. In Zermatt, we just stayed the 2 nights, so we really only had 1 full day there. We visited Zermatt previously, so it was a short stay, but it was great to be able to return. We were fortunate that we were able to see the Matterhorn without cloud on the first night, and then there weren't too many clouds around it. It was very hot when we were in Zermatt, so it was just fantastic. We went up to the Gornergrat on the cogwheel train there. And one of the things that I'd been really keen to do was to meet the black-nosed sheep. We had Gabi from Gornergrat on episode 51 recently, and she mentioned the Meet the Sheep experience that you can do, and this was great. We actually walked from Gornergrat via the Riffelsee Lake to Rotenborden, and because it was so hot, the sheep were being kept with their shepherdess in a shady area under the cable car station. And it was, fantastic just to meet them, pat them. They're so friendly and they're just adorable. From Zermatt, we moved over to the French-speaking side of Switzerland and along the Montreux Riviera. But we didn't stay in Montreux itself. We decided to stay in a little village called Chebray, and this is right in the middle of the Lavaux vineyards. You might have seen photos of the vineyards. They're a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The vineyards are terraced on the side of a hill which runs down into Lake Geneva, so it's a beautiful setting. It's only 10 minutes from Vevey, Chebray, and about 30 minutes from Montreux by train. And even though we were staying, as I said, right in the middle of the vineyards, the public transport was just fantastic. So we had no trouble getting to and from anywhere that we wanted to go. The first night we were there, we were lucky enough to have secured tickets for a concert at the Montreux Jazz Festival. So we saw Van Morrison in concert, which was great. And it was really good to be able then to afterwards mingle around, and just the atmosphere was incredible. Obviously, the jazz festival or big events like that have been affected over the last couple of years, so everyone was just out and about and having a fantastic time. We also spent some time wandering through the village of Saint-Sapharin, another of the most beautiful villages in Switzerland. And it was not far from Chebray, so we we walked down to there and had a wander around, and then took the train to Vevey, where we wandered along the promenade and enjoyed the lake views. That was great. The Charlie Chaplin Museum in Vevey actually, was a really pleasant surprise. I really enjoyed it. I'm not particularly a huge Charlie Chaplin fan, I guess, but I mean, I appreciate the impact he had on the movie industry all those years ago. But the museum is so well done. It's you could spend hours there. It was very, very good. So I highly recommend that. Chebray was also our starting trip for a day trip to Gruyere and Maison Cuillère, the chocolate factory. And this was a fantastic day out, but it was a very big day. So when you do, or when you're in Montreux, for example, you can do an organised day trip which takes you to both Gruyere and Maison Cuillère. And that probably is the better way to do it. We did it all independently. So for part of the trip, we were on the Golden Pass train, which is one of the beautiful panoramic trains, and that took us to a place called Montbovon, and from there we changed to just a regular regional train to Gruyere. When we got off the train, opposite the station is the Gruyere cheese factory, so you can go in there, you can do a tour and see how the cheese is made and buy some of the cheese. From there to get up into the Gruyere, into the old town itself, you've got to walk up a pretty decent hill. You'd probably need to allow at least 10 to 15 minutes to walk up the hill. Gruyere itself is wonderful. It's a really picturesque town. We had a lovely lunch there and sitting outside one of the restaurants. Got the castle view in the background. There's some beautiful little shops and boutiques, and it's great. But then if you want to go to Maison Cuillère, the chocolate factory, it's actually in another town. And there's no sort of direct transport from Gruyere to the chocolate factory. So what we had to do, we went to the tourist office, got all the instructions. We had to walk down from Gruyere, probably about 30 minutes to the next little town, and wait there for the bus, which from memory, I think it only went hourly. So then we had to get the bus from there to Broc, to where Maison Cuillère is, and it didn't actually go right to the stop outside the chocolate factory itself. It was a little way, so we had to walk from there to the chocolate factory. But once we were at the chocolate factory, it was absolutely fantastic. Free entry with the Swiss Travel Pass, and it's really, really good exhibition that you wander through with an audio guide, and it explains the chocolate making process, and that was great. Then we had to get from there back to Gruyere. So this time we did a bus and a train ride, got back to Gruyere, and then took the normal train back to Montbovon and the Golden Pass train back to Montreux. And this time we were in a Belle Epoque carriage, one of the old style carriages, which was lovely. So it's definitely doable as an independent traveller. And keeping in mind all that travel was free for the whole day with our Swiss Travel Pass. So it's definitely doable, but it is a lot of changing, and it's possible if I was doing it again, or I was a first-time traveller and I was not too confident about all the changes, I would definitely book one of the organised tours. From there, we moved a bit further west to Yverdon-les-Bains. This is a town that has been known for centuries for its thermal baths. And again, we used it as a base for visiting other towns in the area. One of those was Morton, which is a medieval town on the lake of the same name, Lake Morton. And beautiful town. I've been seeing photos of it for years and years and always thought how nice it looked. And it's a lovely town, beautiful cobbled old town with covered arcades full of boutiques and restaurants. Very nice. A castle there, of course, and the lake, as I mentioned. So Lake Morton, or Mortensee, is one of 3 lakes in this area, and we were able to do cruises on all of them, which was fantastic. So from Morton, we cruised back to Neuchâtel, and to do that, you first cruise across Lake Morton, then you go through a canal which connects you to Lake Neuchâtel. So that was a really interesting cruise and a good way to get from one place to the other. The next day we went to La Neuveville, which I'd only recently heard of. It's another village. It's classified as one of the most beautiful in Switzerland, and it really was impressive. It's quite a small town, and the buildings in the main street are just beautiful. They're all bright colours. And when we were there, we were the only 2 people that were wandering around the street, so we had it pretty much all to ourselves. La Neuveville is located on Lake Biel. So whilst we were there, we hopped on board a boat and cruised up to a town a bit further along called Thuan, had a beautiful lunch there overlooking the lake, and then hopped on the next boat and cruised back before taking the train back to our base at Everden-les-Bains. And again, all those cruises were covered by Swiss Travel Pass. Next, we moved back in towards central Switzerland, and we headed to the town of Spiez for 2 nights. If you're a regular podcast listener, you might remember an earlier episode where I chatted to Cashew from the Belvedere Strand Hotel, and we were fortunate to stay here for 2 nights, and it was just amazing. So Spiez, if you're not familiar with it, is located on Lake Thun, so it's only about 20 minutes by train from Interlaken. It's just a beautiful town with a castle overlooking a really pretty harbour. And it was just a great place to just relax and unwind. The hotel itself has a spa, an infinity pool, its own private lakeside Lido area. So we just spent most of our time there just swimming and relaxing and just enjoying the beautiful scenery. The day we left there, the day before we left, so our middle day in Spiez, that was the last day that we had the Swiss Travel Pass. We'd had it for 15 days, and it ran out that day. So the next day, the day we left Spiez, we started using the regional pass Berner Oberland. We had that for 8 days. So on this day, when we're moving on from Spiez, we did a day trip up to Niesen on the funicular. And that's a really good day trip if you're looking for something a little bit different. If you don't want to do the regular Jungfrau or Schilthorn, Niesen is a great alternative. After we'd come back down from Niesen, we headed to Lauterbrunnen, and many of you will know that Lauterbrunnen is probably my favourite place in all of Switzerland. I first visited here 30-odd years ago and, fell in love at first sight, and that love hasn't waned. I still love it as much today as I did back then. So we were in Lauterbrunnen for 7 nights, and this time we had planned to do different things than we'd done in the past. We did excursions every day, but we visited lots of new places in the region. So some of those were Mannlichen, Aare Gorge, Beatenberg. We rode the Eiger Express cable car, which only opened in December 2020, so it was new from the last time I'd visited. And we also went to the Traufer factory. And if you're not sure what that is, if you've been in Switzerland, you might have noticed some wooden cows that are sold in most souvenir shops, and they're just gorgeous. So recently the actual factory opened. You can now go and visit and buy these Traufer cows, wooden cows, and see how they're made. And it's a great really great setup, perfect for children too, because there's actually some hands-on where they can actually paint the little wooden cows and make their own. During our stay in Lauterbrunnen, we had been invited to stay for a night at Hotel Gloria, Beatenberg. Now, I had Jackie and Bernie, the owners of the hotel, on episode 26 of the podcast. And we'd sort of kept in touch after that, and it just sounded such a great place to stay. So when they kindly invited my husband and I to spend a night at the hotel, we jumped at the chance. I'd seen plenty of photos on Instagram of just the beautiful views, and not only that, the delicious meals. Bernie is a 5-star Swiss chef, and we were so excited to go and actually stay the night, and it was wonderful. Such a beautiful location. You're only sort of 20-25 minutes from Interlaken, but you're right up on a hill overlooking Lake Thun, so you're away from all the crowds, but you're still close enough to get everywhere you want to in the Jungfrau region for a day trip. So it was a wonderful location, and that was one of the highlights of our trip for sure. After our week-long stay in the Jungfrau region, we moved on to Zurich for the final couple of nights of our trip, and we enjoyed lake cruises. We did a fantastic tour with Best of Switzerland tours, which included the city sites, a cruise on Lake Zurich, and the Lindt Home of Chocolate. Our last full day in Switzerland was the 1st of August, which was the Swiss National Day. So that evening we took a lake cruise, and there was lots and lots of fireworks at different communities around the lake. So that was a great way to finish off our 5 weeks in Switzerland. Now, I will include a link in the show notes to our full itinerary. So if you want any more information about those places that I've mentioned, the hotels that we stayed at, etc., you'll find all that in the link in the show notes. Now, what were the highlights of the trip? Well, I'll start by saying that I'm not really a fan of cable cars because I've got a fear of heights. But on this trip, I just decided to grit my teeth and get on with it, or I was going to miss out big time. And surprisingly, or maybe not so surprisingly, some of these cable car rides are right up there at the top of my highlights list. I still don't love them, but the places they can take you are truly incredible and well worth the 10 or 20 minutes of unease that I felt. So in no particular order, some of the highlights of our trip were the people we met, and these were not just the fantastic previous podcast guests that we met up with, but also the locals and the people in different hotels and tourist establishments. We found them to be fantastic. They were obviously very keen to have tourists back again, and we felt genuinely appreciated for being there. We had some amazing meals when we were in Switzerland. I mentioned Bernie's meals at Hotel Gloria, but there were so many others as well. The food at Hotel Belvedere Strand Hotel was great. We had some beautiful meals at Gasthof's when we were out hiking for the day. So many great meals. We had the typical sliced veal in creamy mushroom sauce in Zurich. So many great meals. And it's not all the heavy sort of typically Swiss food that you might expect. The cuisine, it's international. So don't think that you won't be able to get an Indian meal or a Chinese meal or an Italian meal. It's all there. We were fortunate when we were in the Appenzeller land to visit the Jodelfest. This is a traditional festival where there are yodelers, of course, the Alphorn players, flag throwing. So it was just fantastic. As I said, we were just fortunate that we were there at the right weekend, and we went along to the festival on the Saturday, and the streets were just packed with everyone in their traditional costumes. There was Alphorn players over here. There was a little group of yodelers here, someone throwing flags, and it was fantastic. So sometimes those little festivals that you stumble across can be one of the best things about your trip. We did quite a few hikes when we were there, and two in particular that I really loved were the hike to Sea, which is in Appenzeller Land. And it's not easy to get there. You have to either walk up from the town in the valley, which is called Wasserrauen, or you can take a cable car up to Ebenelp and then hike down to the lake and then hike further back down to the town. So it's a big commitment, I'd say, but it was just fantastic, and the lake is just crystal clear, pristine, and we spent a few hours just sitting by the lakeside, just admiring the view. It was so great. One little place we went to that I'd heard about and been wanting to visit for a while is called Quinten. And this is on Lake Walensee, which is in the east of Switzerland. You can only reach the village either on foot or by boat. So we took the boat from Wallenstadt, which took about 45 minutes from memory, and arrived at Quinten, which is this tiny little village tucked in between a very steep mountainside and the lake. And there's a couple of restaurants there, a couple of little, I don't know what you would call them, houses that sell their own produce, and that's about it. So it was just lovely. We had a beautiful lunch there. We walked along to the next little settlement, which is called O. That took about 25 minutes, just appreciating the lake views all the way. And then we walked back and hopped on the boat back to Wallenstadt. All of the cruises that we did actually were amazing. We did so many. Those couple when we're at Lake Lugano, 3 when we're in Western Switzerland. We did a cruise on Lake Geneva. We did a cruise on Lake Brienz. We did a cruise on Lake Zurich. And every lake is different, but they're all so beautiful. And it's just such a relaxing way to see the scenery and to see the towns and the cities from another perspective. Montebrae was great. I mentioned earlier that the views, Lake Lugano is quite fjord-like, so the views from there were really spectacular, and it was a perfect day weather-wise, so that was wonderful. I mentioned already again about meeting the sheep. We did a lot of excursions in the Jungfrau region, and the Schilthorn excursion that we did was fantastic. Again, the weather was just perfect. We went up the sky. There's hardly a cloud in the sky. You could just see for miles. So the views were fantastic. We had a lovely lunch at the Piz Gloria revolving restaurant. And then on the way back down, we hiked from Mürren to Gimmelwald and then caught the cable car back down to the lower station again. A new thing that we did this time was to visit Mannlichen. And this is a mountain trip that I'd never done before. I'd seen the cable car both from the Wengen side and from Grindelwald side many, many times, and always thought, no way will you get me on that. It looks too steep and too scary. But I'd read and heard so much about Mannlichen that I thought, no, I've just got to do it. So one day we set off, took the train from Lauterbrunnen to Wengen, the cable car up to Mannlichen, and it is very steep, but I just didn't look. And after spending some time at Mannlichen, we then took the cable car down the other side to Grindelwald. We had a look around there, and then we hopped onto the new Eiger Express to take us, that's a big cable car, took us up to the Eiger Glacier, and then we hiked back down to Kleine Scheidegg before catching the train all the way back. And again, the day was just amazing. The sky's so blue. It was the perfect day, and that was probably one of the absolute best days of the holiday, I think, just because of the scenery, the amazing engineering of all the cable cars, the hike, the weather. It was just fantastic. In fact, we enjoyed the trip between Wengen, Mannlichen and Grindelwald so much that we actually did that again a couple of days later. That was so good. Niederhorn was another mountain that we went to. So it's again, it's easy to do from Interlaken, but we did this while we were staying at Beatenberg at Hotel Gloria. And Niederhorn, again, you go up on a cable car. The views are fantastic. But this is a lot less commercial than some of the other mountains. So it's it's a beautiful change. It's lovely. There's nothing missing, absolutely. There's a nice restaurant. There's plenty of hiking trails, but it's certainly less commercial than the others. So if you want to get away from, mainstream tourism, this is a great option as well. RA Gorge was another great day out that we loved. We did that from Lauterbrunn, took the train to Meiringen and did Reichenbach Falls and RA Gorge. And it's just amazing. You walk through this gorge for about 1,400 metres. You can just see how the river has carved out through the mountains over millions of years. And it's really well done. There's footpaths and boardwalks all along so that you can walk easily along and see the power of nature. And, of course, Lindholm of chocolate. That has to be a favourite. Now, I thought I'd just share my thoughts on the Swiss Travel Pass because we've had Andy from Swiss Travel System on the podcast numerous times, and we all know the benefits of the Swiss Travel Pass. But I just wanted to give you my thoughts, having used it for 15 consecutive days. And the first thing I just want to say, if you're not actually familiar with it, the Swiss Travel Pass is a hop-on, hop-off ticket for all public transport in Switzerland. So that's trains, buses, boats, trams. As well as that, you get discounts, up to 50% discount on most mountain excursions in Switzerland, and you get entry to 500 plus museums for free. So it's really just the all-in-one ticket for public transport in Switzerland. The great thing was that we could get anywhere we wanted. We never felt sort of stranded because we didn't have a car. There was always a bus or a train or a boat to get us, wherever we wanted to go. And as my husband kept saying, this pass is gold. We would just rock up to the station or where the bus stopped, get on, show our pass, no need to fumble around looking for change to buy a bus ticket or whatever. And we could just be so spontaneous. When we were in Vevey, for instance, we wandered along the promenade. It was getting close to dinner time. And we thought, what will we do for dinner? Well, we saw the boat coming into port. Let's hop on the boat, we said. So on we jumped. We sailed up to Lausanne, where we had dinner. And we could just be spontaneous because we didn't have to worry about, is this covered or is this not covered and how much is it going to cost? On we hopped and we could just do that. And we did that a few times. We just decided at the spur of the moment, let's go here or let's go there because we had the pass and it covered everything. We had a first class Swiss Travel Pass and often we were the only passengers in the carriage. Occasionally there would be 2 or 3 others, but rarely was the carriage, very, very rarely was the carriage more than half full. And as I said, very, very often we were the only 2 in first class. Now, this may not be normal. I think the tourist numbers still aren't back to what they were pre-COVID in most cases. So if you travel, for instance, in July or August 2023, that may not be the case, but that was certainly the case in 2022. There were 4 lake cruises, as I mentioned, that were included, or we did 4 lake cruises rather, whilst we had the Swiss Travel Pass. And with those, we just had to hop on board, show our pass either when we got on or when the ticket inspector came around, and no money changed hands. The Glacier Express and the Golden Pass train were both, we both travelled on both of those while we had the pass, and again, no need for any money to exchange hands. The Glacier Express does require seat reservations, but that applies whether you buy a regular ticket or have a pass, so that's standard across the board. But the actual train journey itself was covered. So we were gifted a 15-day first-class pass, which normally costs 675 Swiss franc. I've calculated that we got at least 1,069 Swiss franc value from our pass. So at least 400 Swiss franc in front had we have actually paid for the pass itself. So it's fantastic value. And we had some days where we didn't travel great distances, or we didn't probably use the pass as much as we could have. So the potential for even greater savings is definitely there. Now, as I mentioned, we had, after we'd finished with this Swiss travel pass, we had a regional pass Berner Oberland for 8 days. Now, I chose it because I wanted to explore more of the Bernese Oberland, not just the immediate Jungfrau region. And so this was the best option for us. And again, it's a hop-on, hop-off ticket for public transport in the Bernese Oberland. The pass covers a huge number of mountain excursions, and the ones that we did with the pass were Niesen, Niederhorn, Wengen to Mannlichen twice, Mannlichen to Grindelwald twice, the Eiger Express from Grindelwald to Eiger Glacier, Grindelwald back to Mannlichen another day, Almendhübel, which is at the Schilthorn, and there's also a discounted fare for the cable car from Mürren to Schilthorn for pass holders. This pass also covered our cruise on Lake Brienz and our train from Interlaken to Lucerne on the day we left the region, travelling on the Lucerne-Interlaken Express. So as well as that, there was all the regional trains. We went into Interlaken numerous times. From Lauterbrunnen, we went up to Beatenberg, which was covered. We used the bus in Lauterbrunnen numerous times. So it's fantastic value. We went to Meiringen too, so that was covered as well. We were gifted a first-class 8-day pass, which normally sells for 370 Swiss franc, and we had got at least 630 Swiss franc value from that pass. So again, fantastic value, and definitely worth your while if you're going to be spending time in the greater Bernese Oberland region. Okay, some things to know, or great tips, things that really helped me on this trip. The must-have apps. 2 apps that I recommend that you put onto your phone before you leave home: the SBB mobile app, which is for the Swiss railways, and Swiss Meteo for the weather. The Swiss Railways app, the SBB mobile app, we just use that constantly for timetables. So if we were planning to go from wherever, let's say from Spiez to Interlaken, I would just bring that up on the app and find out all the different train times. It tells you what platform they leave from. If you need to change trains, it'll tell you what platform you're getting off at and what platform you're getting onto. Absolutely fantastic. The app, I just use, as I said, I use that constantly for timetables, and it was fantastic. You can look for trains, buses, boats, trams, everything. It's great. The Swiss Meteo app also was a must-have for the weather forecast. Now, my husband and I did a bit of a test, I guess. So he just looked at the weather forecast on the app that came on his iPhone, and I would look at the Swiss Meteo app, and they could be vastly different for the same place, the same day. But the Swiss Meteo app was always the one that was most accurate. So what I'm going to say is, if you're looking at the weather forecast on your phone, just on the app that comes with your phone, and it says it's going to rain for a week, please don't despair. Download the Swiss Meteo app, and it changes very regularly. And it also has, if you open the particular day that you're looking for, it'll tell you the time that any rain or bad weather is forecast. So when you look at the overview on the Swiss Meteo app, it might say rain, but if you click on the day that you're inquiring about, it'll tell you when that rain is expected and how much. It might be at 2 a.m. in the morning, and it might be 1 mil, but it still will say rain on the overview. But the Swiss Meteo app is definitely more accurate than the one that certainly that comes up on your phone. Another tip there is to check webcams before you're setting off on an excursion. So if you're heading up to the Schilthorn for the day, you can go onto the Schilthorn website, and it'll have a webcam which shows you live pictures from the mountaintop. So it might be cloudy or raining down in the valley or wherever you're staying, but it might be fine at the top, and vice versa. We paid almost everything with a preloaded debit card, and I use Wise, which allows you to add funds to your account and convert them to Swiss francs, and the exchange rates are very good. So every time we went to pay for something, I would just tap my Wise card, and the payment would be made in Swiss francs. There's no transaction fees from Wise, and only once were we charged a fee from a local bank, which I think was about £2.75. But in 5 weeks, with all the transactions we did, that was fantastic. And that only occurred when I withdrew some cash at one bank, which I probably did about 5 or 6 times throughout the trip. We didn't really need cash very often, but I just like to have some with me as a backup. We rented a Wi-Fi device from Travelers Wi-Fi, which was absolutely fantastic. In the past on trips, we've just generally relied on Wi-Fi at hotels or restaurants or so on. But this time I really wanted to have access to Wi-Fi as we were traveling during the day, so that I could look up timetables, weather, directions, all that sort of thing, webcams and opening times. And having this device from Travelers Wi-Fi was great. Every night we would just charge it overnight, and then it would last sort of 8 to 10 hours during the day, depending how much we used it, of course. And there's numerous places where you can collect those. So you actually rent the device, and then you can pre-book it and pick it up at the airport when you arrive. I think you can actually even have it sent to a hotel in some cases. And then it comes with all the instructions and a prepaid bag, so that on the day that you're leaving the country, assuming you've rented it for the whole duration, you just pop the whole package back into this prepaid bag and put it back in a post box, and all done. Definitely worthwhile. It paid for itself over and over again. It was really hot in Switzerland when we were there in July. The day we arrived in Lauterbrunnen, it was 31, and I've been to Lauterbrunnen many, many times and never known it to be that hot. So air conditioning is very, very useful if you're traveling during summer, and it's not common. So if this is a concern of yours, check that your hotel has air conditioning when you're booking it. As I said, it can get very, very hot, and if you're on the 3rd or 4th level of a hotel or an apartment building, we all know heat rises and it can be quite uncomfortable up there. So if that is something that concerns you, make sure you look out for air conditioning. Another commonly asked question that I get is about public toilets and do you have to pay to use them? Well, the only times that we needed to pay for public toilets was at a couple of the major train stations, and it usually only cost one Swiss franc. Places like tourist attractions and mountain tops, when you go there, the toilets are always free. If you're in a town and there's a co-op or a Migros supermarket, if they have a restaurant, which often they do, there'll be free toilets there. Tourist officers can usually direct you into the best, the nearest public toilet that's free. But as I said, we only paid at a couple of the major stations. We used the luggage lockers at stations quite a number of times and found them to be great. All the ones that we came across were all cash only or coin only, mostly charging 5 Swiss franc for a small locker, which would fit quite a small suitcase in it. And then larger lockers were 7 franc at most places. And the couple of times we rented one for 7 franc, we could fit in both our suitcases and both carry-on bags, like little backpacks. So that was great. We used the supermarkets as often as we can. We visited the supermarkets as often as we could for pre-packaged meals. Often, if we'd been out and about for the day, we might have had lunch at a mountain restaurant, and so we didn't really feel like eating too much for dinner. So we'd go and buy a salad each, some bread or some yogurt or something small, and we'll just have that in the room, in our hotel room or our apartment. And this is also a great way to save money if you don't want to eat at mountain restaurants when you're going on an excursion. Go and buy some things from the supermarket and take them with you. They usually have a fantastic selection of salads, of pre-made sandwiches, all sorts of things, sushi, anything that takes your fancy. So that's my trip in a nutshell. I hope you found the info I've shared helpful with your trip planning. Maybe you've just added a new destination or two to your Swiss itinerary. Like I said before, I'll include a link in the show notes to the detailed version of my itinerary, and there'll also be links to articles on many of the destinations I've visited, as well as the rail passes, hotels, and products that I've mentioned in this episode. For additional help with planning your own itinerary, my Switzerland itinerary planner could be just what you're looking for. It covers 20 suggested Switzerland itineraries for durations ranging from 3 days to 2 months, practical tips for getting around Switzerland, and travel times between destinations by both car and train. You'll find a link to the itinerary planner in the show notes too. And you can find those show notes at holidaystoswitzerland.com/episode 53. Thanks for joining me today. I look forward to chatting to you again on the next episode of the Holidays to Switzerland Travel Podcast. Cheers!
If you'd like more great resources to help you plan your dream trip to Switzerland, there are lots of ways to connect with us. Visit our website holidaystoswitzerland.com, sign up for our monthly newsletter, or join our friendly, helpful community of past and future travellers in our Switzerland travel planning group. You'll also find the links to connect with us in the show notes for this episode. Show notes and a list of all previous episodes are available at holidaystoswitzerland.com/podcast. Don't miss out on your fortnightly dose of Swiss travel inspo. Hit the subscribe button on your favourite podcast app so you never miss an episode. And if you enjoyed the show, please leave a rating. That's all for this edition of the Holidays to Switzerland Travel Podcast. Thanks for joining us and happy travel planning.